Then he was never sick, like not even a cold. He was always really strong. He seemed a very strong man, and he was intelligent. He was like my rock. Like anything I needed to know, I could ask him, and he knew everything. But then when he got depressed, I realized that he was human.
I've suffered through depression myself 3 times. The first time, it was a month, you don't know the cause. I mean, that's the mystery about depression. You just don't know, right? It's kind of like you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you lose interest in things, you're crying, you're losing weight for no known reason. So that time just took a month off, seemed to kind of pass. Then it happened, maybe a year after that again for 3 months, similar symptoms and so on. And then boom, third time that it happened, I was off work for well over a year.
The first symptoms is he starts sleeping less, and he tosses and turns in bed all night, and he takes deep breath, and so I can tell, usually he sleeps well. So as soon as he starts not sleeping well, I know there's something bothering him. I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I didn't go out to work during the day, so I was with him during that 7 days a week, like 24 hours a day. So I had knots in my stomach like him. I got anxious, nervous.
It's interesting, like the second time, Yolande saw the signs faster than I did, right? Because they're with you all day long. So it's living hell for your significant other.
I was always afraid, like you hear people depressed that they take their lives, or even sometimes I think, like, what will he do during the night? So that's why I didn't sleep some nights, because I didn't trust him.
Every little decision you're trying to make drains your energy. You want to reach out for help, you want to call a colleague at work, but you just can't get yourself, I guess, brave enough to do it. That's how your day starts off, and eventually somehow you get enough courage to go. That could involve sitting in the parking lot crying in your car for a while.
The worst time for me, I think, was when he was talking to the physician that works for KPMG in Toronto, and we were calling him pretty often. And the one day that Denis called him, it was really stressful, and the doctor asked him, after talking to Denis for a while, he asked him to talk to me. So when I got on the phone, he just explained to me, he asked me if I knew where the Royal Ottawa was and how to get there. Because he said Denis is pretty low, and if you ever feel that you need to bring him there day or night, do it.
The turning point is when you seriously reach out for help. A lot of the stress around living through depression is, will I be able to do my work again? The load that you take off yourself when you make that phone call is incredible. To an employee, I would say, get help. Don't be ashamed. The self-stigma is self-imposed in a lot of respects, so reach out, and the sooner you reach for help, the sooner your recovery is going to start taking place, and the sooner you're going to bounce back. And the good news is there is a cure.
In the new role, by the way, I know we're in good hands with you at the helm of CPA Canada. It'll be different to talk about mental health today instead of debits and credits and provisions and allowances and.
Well, it's it's maybe a bit different, but it's also part of the reality of our profession. How excited you were to do the role, yeah, but also how committed your firm was to raise the bar on that issue. So I still remember the people around the table, the audit committee. They were all very impressed by what your firm was doing, but also with the courage that you were showing to take this on and helping maybe shape a different culture, a different perspective, a different way of looking at it, and help our friends and colleagues in the profession and their family, their family members. As we said, when health problem, to say, comes up, to say, when a mental issue, to say, comes up, we call it a mental injury. Sometimes it's a mental injury.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's not only the person that suffer,
Yeah.
it is the family, and it's all the those are les proches. These
Yeah.
are so, and I think your the video is with your wife. So it's very telling on that. So I think we're doing it not only for our own members, but also for their loved
Yeah.
ones. So
The entire circle of care. You know, we often forget the supporters in this space. When I do a session, one comes to mind, the miners like Gala in Toronto. You know, it's all business people, and most of the people who were coming to thank me afterwards were all the supporters, not actually the people who suffered. And it was interesting, Charles-Antoine, what they were telling me is that often when you listen to an Olympian like Clara Hughes, who's my hero in this space, it's about her story. And people see, oh, an Olympian, I'm not an Olympian, won't happen to me. Or so it's interesting that we often forget the living hell that the circle of care lives through, and so important in the work world. You know, you and I can quickly do the math of how many awake hours we spend with our colleagues at work. So we are significant others to each other at work, hence the importance of mental health in the milieu of the workforce, of how we all have a role to play. And if we can be walking the talk instead of let's talk.
Yeah.
I did a session for the Toronto Board of Trade a few weeks ago with Dr. Daw, one of the Bell Talk doctors, and I jokingly said, you know, it's been, I think, 11 or 12 years. Is it not time to rebrand to walking the talk? Because I think we've been talking about this long enough, right? Like we've become very good in a boardroom setting to talk about mental health. But if we surveyed our participant and asked him, if it was you suffering, would you be brave enough to call your EFAP or to ask a colleague? Many people, it's still a no. So I hope our session today will bring people to a yes and realize that you can't cure yourself out of cancer.
Yeah.
So you can't necessarily cure yourself out of a mental illness without getting proper help, right?
It was quite interesting, again, going back to the video, that how your own journey, you know, you had to go through first time, second time, and then third time to see how it happened. And it took you almost by surprise the first time it happened to you.
Yeah.
And then you recovered to say, but you didn't seek help at the time.
No.
Say you've got to tough it out. The second time, a year later.
Yep.
Came back, and then was a bit more severe at that time. And okay, you recovered, and so on, but it was not dealt with. So, and then the big event came, a year later, and then it was. How can we help, our colleagues, our friends, our young people, to, you know, the first time it happened to you, to say don't downplay it.
Yeah.
There might be something bigger than what you think there. So it's like, let's say you're going for blood tests. If you don't, we all go for our annual exams, and we do all the blood work, the urine work, and so on. And sometimes there's something that doesn't work, and then we look into it right away. When it comes to mental health, people say still reluctant. How can we help trigger that point to say that okay, I've got to pay attention to it?
Yeah, you know, Antoine, that's the $1 million question, because if we could all accept and be standing like this, talking about mental health and not being afraid to say, I'm seeing a counselor or I'm seeking help, I don't think we'd be having this session today. My lived experience, I see develop weekly, you know, and we'll get into COVID later in that impact, but my role is easy to play because when somebody reaches out in a crisis mode, I've been there, I've seen it, so I know the steps and what to do. I think the day that individually we all accept that mental health is health, right? It's like physical health. I always said that I wish I would have had a ski injury, because a ski injury is easy.
It's visible.
You see it. You'd come and visit me, bring me a couple of magazines and say, Denis, that was one great fall you had. Look at you. And when does your physio start? You know what to say, language, and so on. But when it's with mental health, you know, and that's a pointers on itself. When somebody is off for mental health reasons, it becomes even lonelier, right? Because you might be thinking about me, oh, I should reach out to Denis, but you don't, you get busy, or you may not be comfortable with the language and so on, right? So I think raising our personal knowledge around this, like education to me is number one in this space, right? The best example is parents. Like this is so generational, Charles-Antoine. It's when I do a session, the 20, the 30, you know, those band, high five, Denis, that was great. My mom, my sister, this medication. Why? Well, they've had safe talk in high school. They know about big white wall. They know about mental health apps, right? The 30 to 40, they go, Denis, could I see you in private? And they make sure nobody's snooping, and they're talking to me about themselves. The 40 plus come in and talk to me about a friend, right? So it's not because the 40 plus are bad people. We grew up in an era where we didn't have training around this, right? So I'm convinced that as we move these younger generations, especially in accounting firms where they're hiring a lot of young talents, with time, it will become natural. But for now, I think the more that people could accept that mental health is health and you have to do something about it, right? Our firm doctor had a good quote. He said, it's like a hot water tank. Because how many people shop for a hot water tank until it has a mess on the floor or you're taking a cold shower, right? But it's the reality of doing something about it preventive. And COVID now has opened a whole new book for that, right?
Yeah. This is maybe something I wanted to maybe follow up on. The city, we're living this in a very challenging time at the moment. The city was having that discussion this morning, say, with colleagues. The city, we're doing some projects, I say, and it's stressful, really, really stressful, let's say, for our people, let's say, to deal, let's say, with complex issues, and then you've got the COVID, let's say, on top of it, that does not enable you to say to have to say the network that you know that you normally have, to see a lot of people working by themselves, to see in front of of a PC, to see, and we're doing Zoom time, Teams, to see and everything, to see, so and it's back to back, to see, so and I think to see I'm lucky to see, I'm really lucky to see.
We're all zoomed out.
Yeah, we're zoomed out. But you know, I'm lucky where I'm in my life, to see all my kids are growing up and everything. But I think to say, I go back to say when I was in 30 and 40, you see, with kids and everything. This is so I can just imagine to see the challenge to see that our young people say are going through at the moment, and many of them are suffering in silence. This is, so and it's that is of a particular concern, to say, to me as a leader, as a person, as a parent. To say, so that, let's see, many of our young people, let's say, are maybe experiencing something that we never had to live. The only time we saw that, to say, was in movie, and it wasn't. Now it's real. So I don't know if any word of advice, wisdom that you could share, how to deal with this particular circumstances, which would make it even tougher for our people.
You know, it's the prime example of the importance that if we had cared for our mental health before COVID hit, perhaps we would have a little more resilience, or we would have individual coping skills, versus now, you know, you read a lot of articles that there's a tsunami around mental health. I see that because, you know, the demand on our providers, and some of them not having the capacity or the ability to respond if you didn't have a previous relationships and so on. So, you know, COVID to me is a white page of. My daughter works in research at the aquarium in Vancouver, and she says, Dad, like COVID is like a cleansing for the planet in her world of animals. In our world too, as human beings, it's a cleansing in the sense that I got interviewed for some media in Quebec last week, and they asked me the positive that I saw in COVID. And some of the positive is that you hear of a lot of families saying, my kids don't need to be in 3 competitive sports. One is enough, right? Like the being taxi parents, why is that? So reprioritizing right down to financial needs and so on, and size of vehicles and so on. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that have in COVID that have forced people to slow down and look at things differently. But the lens of their health and so on and coping mechanism, if it had not been part of their regular DNA, you know, the 3 R's of resilience, the third one is regular positive habits. And the number one thing that I see during COVID is that me time, you know, like you've heard me speak before where I'm big on me, family, work. And sometimes I get taken to task, why isn't it family first? Well, you've just seen my video. If you're not well, you're a liability to your family,
Absolutely.
right? So the me time in COVID is the number one thing that I'm seeing people, we only have so much resilience, right? Like by nature and our members, we handle a lot of stress, right? Our coping stress level is fairly high, but we've never been testing this way either, right? With children at home and working remote. And so it's a potpourri that it's not because it ties in so nicely to mental health that it's not that people are weak. We've never been tested this way, right? And if you haven't changed a thing in COVID, you're still operating like you were, that's a bit of a train wreck about to happen, right?
Remember, Sadie, my mother used to tell us when we were young, to say that in French it's called charité bien ordonnée commence par soi-même. So you've got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of the others. You know, when you're kids, they say, so that's a bit selfish. So but over time, they say you really come to appreciate, and she meant it in a very positive, very adult manner. So make sure that you are well yourself, and then you can take care of the others. But if you're just mismanaging yourself and looking after everybody else, I've seen it. It's happens. Very, very generous people that takes care of everyone, and then they become a casualty.
You'll like this quote my firm doctor always says, how can you love your patients if you don't love yourself? And I mean, in reality, this is a little bit of what
it's not being selfish.
Right?
It's just it is the thing to do.
I always use the analogy of a car. Like, if you're a Tesla and you're not plugging in, you're still a horrible Tesla, right? Well, it's no different for us, right? Or one of the doctors we work with always says, your dashboard, there's a light on there that's lit. Could be an oil change or whatever. On your fancy car, you wouldn't wait, but on yourself, odds are you've been waiting too long, right?
So all these, I think these are all maybe hopefully a bit of word of wisdom to say that our colleagues, and especially our young people, so they will pick up on, and maybe less young people too, to say will pick up on to say, so this is not an issue of you were talking earlier on about say shame. So of coming up and asking for help. So maybe just help bring to say there's no shame. It's just we all need help at different point in time, and some of us have some good support system, and depending on where you are in your life cycle. Sometimes you'll have a stronger support system than others. So don't assume that your support system will always be, you've got to work and make sure that you've got to know one, but at some time in your life it might be less strong. So don't be afraid. I know I grew up in the firm, and grew up also work in government and the like. And I know there's help there. There's reception, the receptivity on this. There's and I really encourage our people to say, go and don't be afraid. Ask for help. It will come. It will come.
That's the starting point, Charles-Antoine, to recovery. You know, that first, you know, in the video you hear me say that a lot of stigma is self-imposed. And that's like one of the number one questions that people ask me, and that it's cognitive, right? Your mind... I tried to resign. My mind was telling me I'm no good, that it's my work, right? So a lot of that is self-imposed on you. Your colleagues, you know, when Denis was off, my colleagues weren't judging me. My colleagues weren't thinking I'm weak. My colleagues wanted to be there for me, but many maybe didn't have the language, right?
Did not know how to.
When I support people sometimes, you know, say, well, what are my colleagues going to say? Often I say simple things like, your colleagues are not going to judge you, but if they were to judge you, that's probably not where you want to be spending your entire career anyway. And it's not like that, right? it is very humbling to ask for help or to be in the circle of care of someone, because it's so personal, right? You come to me for mental health support. It's quite humbling for me to be able, right? And the role you play is a non-judgmental listening role. You're not giving advice, because we're not doctors, right? That's a caveat that I have to say here. We're not medical. We're sharing lived experiences and what we see in corporate Canada and bring them to resources. And there are so many resources out there. Part of the challenge is that people and organizations have never invested much time in this space to be knowledgeable about the resources, and we can get into some of the resources today too.
Yeah, so because I do remember a good friend of mine, in the firm, first class gentleman, really first class. This guy was working hard, was working way too hard, and he ground himself to the ground. He put himself down, completely off the city, but the care that he received around, but he was brave enough.
Yeah.
Raised the city, and he returned to his career, managing partner, executive partner, all these things. So it's not the end of the life. It's like you're broken. It's going to take some time to recover.
Yeah.
Talking about resource to where people can get help. So sometimes we're talking about all these big programs and everything, but this is not a program.
Yeah, you got it.
This is a way of. It's a culture. It's an attitude.
DNA.
Can you maybe help us a bit on that? So just to help our.
That's the approach. You nailed it, Charles-Antoine. I mean, the number one. A lot of my role is external as well. Yeah. So, in the fall pre-COVID, I was touring through interior BC and just doing, often with the panels, somebody from the hospitals, somebody from owner-managed businesses and so on, and asking questions and so on. And, a lot of time, knowing where the resources are is to be able to instill change in an organization. And one of the questions I get, well, Denis, what did KPMG buy? Like, what? Tell us, who's your provider? We didn't buy anything. I've been at this for 3 years now. I've yet to find a program. Yes, you and I can Google many things. We can go to the Royal site, CAMH, and there's a roadmap. But mental health is like you said, it's culture, right? And what I see is that a lot of organizations, it's typical, right? Like even thinking big four accounting firms, a lot of times we won't want to implement something until we have the perfect thing, right? And we do diligence that it's not like that for mental health. Like it's the small steps, and it's doing things and growing from there. It can be as simple as Mental Health Week, World Mental Health Day, having things internally. And growing from there, having employee resource groups where employees meet once a month, now virtually, to talk about mental health matters, and really listening to the team and understanding what the needs are and so on, and then formalizing that. But making mental health as, a basic fundamental thing that within the organizations you're not afraid to talk about.
There's maybe also, I was talking about culture and attitude. And people say that will see this video will probably smile when I'm talking about it, because they've seen me doing this with many of our colleagues, young and less young. It's very important to take the pulse of the organization, the team you're working on. Sometimes the stress level that goes. But the ability to recognize how to manage stress and bring it down a notch. If you're always working at, sure. So if you're doing brain surgery, I probably would like you to be extremely focused on it. If you're dealing, with atomic, you should probably be extremely focused on it. But for the vast majority of the work we do, there's a bit of margin here. Having managing, helping people to manage stress, sense of humor help. So the as part of the culture is so the and people they say will smile because very often you're going to see me to say doing this to say in meetings when everybody is starting to be too stressed. But it's I'm doing this a bit to be to have a bit of humor, but also to say bring down. So in terms of bring down the city, we're not thinking straight here by being too stressed. The city, but having this kind of it's training, say, to help, say, colleagues, because they're all performing perfectly at a very high level. But when the stress becomes too high, it's self-perpetuates. So,
you know, it's interesting, Charles-Antoine, with stress. One of the things that I've learned now, going to all these mental health conferences and working with doctors, is that a lot of people kind of historically in the mental health space, they go stress equals mental health disorder. And that's totally wrong. It's long periods of improperly managed stress could lead to
improperly managed stress.
Exactly. So having those coping mechanisms, be it what it is, you know, like is it meditation, is it yoga, is it mindfulness? And that's an interesting thing that even during COVID, many people now have tried some of these new tools and have realized, you know, something that historically maybe that's a little too out there, now that they've realized it works for them. But that's a great example of you have to own your mental health. You know, within the workforce, people often ask me, Denis, how's big your team and what you do? My team is 7,200 people because everybody has a role to play, right? So when you instill it in the DNA on simple things like putting mental health on the agenda of your meetings, why not? You and I own a construction company together. Every Wednesday morning, it's health and safety. We're in a mind game as professionals, so why couldn't we be talking about the wellness of our team, right? And wellness is not, it's a bit of a broad term, right? It could be physical, it could be financial health, it could be physical health, right? So it's wellness in total is not just mental health, right?
Absolutely. So coming up to say with these maybe different approach how to help our colleagues and friends, say, and young people how to cope with it. It doesn't need to say big program. It's the attitude, say, of your colleagues, your leadership, say, but yourself also. And now you're going to be taking it on. So Denis, we're both accountants, so we like numbers. So can you maybe share with our colleagues and our friends some of the statistics, say, around the mental health issue, so and what does it mean in the Canadian economy, to say, and the we're accountants, so we like to hear those things. So maybe just
you were scaring me there when you said numbers. I don't have my phone. I don't have my calculator. How do you want me to do it?
Okay, a calculator.
You know, every session we go to, even during the Bell Let's Talk, what's the number one statistic we always hear? 1 in 5 people will be impacted by mental health illnesses in their lifetime. If Clara was here, she always says it's at least 2 in 5, because who do you know who has self-diagnosed of hitting a mental health challenge? The statistic I like is totally different than that, and everywhere I go and do a seminar, I always survey participant. I ask the question, who in this, and I'm asking this of our participant here, who has either been impacted directly or has supported somebody who has? The answer is always near 100%, right?
Absolutely.
So it goes to show the importance of this. So we know that this is something that at some point, if it's not us, we're going to be supporting somebody. Some interesting statistics is around medication. Guess what the number one medication that corporate Canada pays for? It's not the heart. It's mental health related, but yet we rarely talk about mental health, right? The one statistic, we hear all the ones about the cost to the economy. I can't remember the number, but it's billions, right? The one that really hits me, and I use a lot sometimes with groups where perhaps people are kind of going, you know, we have benefits and all of that. It's presenteeism. It's a factor of 7.5 times. And what that means is, as an example, if you have a colleague that have been suffering off work or not top of their game and they've been off for a month, upwards to 7.5 months they haven't been performing to the top of their capacities. So when you think of that cost, you know, with our teams and so on productivity, that is a staggering number, right? So that one seems to stick with people. And then we're accountants, return on investment. You know, Deloitte does a study every year, you know, quoting a study from a competitor here. They do great work with that study around the ROI of investing in mental health. And their study shows, and I believe it, that if you're about 10 years in, the ROI is about 4 for 1. And year 1, it's in excess of $1, year 3 and 4. So if you look, in our case, we're about 7 years in. So our ROI, if we buy in, is about $3 saved for every dollar we invest. So it's interesting that when you're investing in your people via benefit or different ways, you're getting it back, right? You're doing it for the right reason, but it's not a cost. And that is something that I remind HR teams out there, that this is not a cost, right? In this world right now where we're so short of resources all the time, you look at Quebec, there's 120,000 jobs that are unfilled. If organizations are not focused on mental health, attracting, retaining the best is going to become, and with COVID now, the expectation that organizations are taking care of the wellness of their teams is being enhanced in a big way as well.
And when we also talk about how to create wealth in this country, you know, when we look at the demographics, the level of the participation rate of Canadian in the workforce is a key determinant. So we can go and nudge a point or half a point by doing a better job on this we're all winning. So thank you for putting some context around the numbers, so that people understand this is just a nice idea. There's also an economic aspect to it. But first and foremost, it's a human thing. It's just a human who got to be focused. But you know, there's a payback to all this. Maybe a different topic. You've got a pretty interesting title, my friend.
I never thought I'd be part of the C-suite.
Yeah, well, you're Chief Mental Officer, for a mental health officer for KPMG. Can you tell us a bit more about how this role came about and how you're exercising that role?
The role came out of our Inclusion and Diversity Council.
Okay.
You know, looking at our goals and so on. You know. Bigger organizations perhaps could have a group council, you know, of various backgrounds and representing, you know, various ethnic populations and so on. And internally, when we looked at our goals and our different pillars, one of the pillars of our strategy is around mental health. So I got involved with doing that when I was still a full service partner with KPMG, dealing with our private company group. And then when I decided to take early retirement, the firm approached me and said, we're creating this role for you.
We've got a role for you, my friend.
Sitting on a plane, Charles-Antoine, I always tell people, they go, oh, that's a neat title. Wow, like they've seen a chief medical officer, but never a chief mental health officer. I describe my role as that I open boardroom doors so that people can bring their whole self to work and not be afraid to talk about their mental health and get care for it. I don't give medical advice. My crisis support role is I help people understand that this is real, that situational or not, it could be in their DNA. They didn't do anything to get to where they're at, you know, unless perhaps they're self-medicating or alcohol or something like that. I make them understand that it's real, and I drag them through resources. And I make sure that on the work front, they're fully supported. Like in a nutshell, that's the role of how it happened in the trenches. The role is everything that is mental health related. And, you know, I'm always careful to say this, that our firm and hopefully other organizations that are maybe carving this out or bringing more light on mental health, we didn't do this because we didn't have an amazing HR team. Let's be realistic, you know, people have amazing HR talent, but the portfolio, mental health is a small piece, right?
Yeah, that's
so when you have somebody whose lens is just mental health, where do you start? You look at benefits, you kind of go, wow, that amount's been the same for X years, and in Toronto, it's so much a session, that doesn't get you very far, right? So you improve benefits, then you look at training, then you look at support systems and so on. So I specifically only oversee mental health, nothing else.
It's very thankful to say to your firm to say to having shown the way to take it seriously and also illustrate it to say by naming you to say in that role, to say putting you in that role and opening up to see not only the door within your own organization but also helping many organizations to say that the CPA community is associated with. So thank you very much to say for doing to say what you do to say in that role. And
paying it back. I've blown away with the reaction, Charles-Antoine.
I'm sure there will be others to say the...
I found one more. I don't feel so naked anymore.
Okay.
In a big bank in Australia with the same title. So there you go, COVID.
So you might have to see a few more colleagues in this role to see in Canada. So you showed the way. So you led the way.
You don't know how proud I am of being a CPA and CPA Canada. Agreeing to do this at our annual conference. I mean, you want to talk change? There's change, right? This wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. I kicked myself. It was on my to-do list to put my story out there on Pivot. And had I known the impact it would have, Charles-Antoine, I would have done a lot sooner. That thing got 44,000 views and over 1,000 reposts. And it's getting dated now, but even today, just before coming to this session, I had a young lady reach out and quote the article, and I could tell in the tone and the language that it touched her. And I responded, I said, hey, I'm actually filming a session with our new CEO on mental health. She said, I'm signing up for the conference. The conference, by the way, many of the members pick various of the packages knowing that they could listen and bring the appetite to talk about this space is here. And I've never been asked to speak to so many places, even universities now looking at their executive MBA programs and going, where do you learn this stuff? We don't learn it anywhere, right? So if you're going to be an Ivy League university and we're sending our kids there and that's not on the curriculum, being so critical to what we do in the business world. So things are changing rapid speed.
Good. So maybe to say we could just move, let's say, a different direction. Can you tell us about some of the strategies that you see are working well for big, small organizations, for across the board? So can you share, say, some of your wisdom, let's say, and how does it work? Let's say, what can work?
Learned so much, Antoine, in the last 3 years of. It's interesting now the conferences I go to are not the typical conferences where we used to meet at. Now it's I feel sometimes like the children's game, which one of these doesn't belong with the others, right? Denise is with a table of doctors with names that I can't even pronounce or degrees, sorry, that I can't pronounce. But it's interesting when it comes to strategies, and very fortunate now, to spend time with corporate Canada and, like the Bells of the world, Via Rail, NAV Canada, as you meet these people at conferences and you exchange. And it's almost like the strategy, it's a little bit, in our world, sometimes we joke about mission statements that you can break into the night and they all pretty much look the same unless you're really walking the talk, right? But I would describe it as three-prong: awareness, training, and support. And the awareness is you got to move the dial somewhere, right? And this, big or small, our participants, it doesn't matter if you're a 10 member or you're 5,000 employees. Awareness, education, right? We're not, we're a rule-based profession. You and I are looking at derivatives. We sort of know where to go. But with this, we're not born with a book of rules, right? So moving the awareness of people is so critical, because especially if we get back to the parent comment earlier, sometimes mom and dad will reach out to me, some of our partners, and say, my daughter's coming home with this language. What does that mean, right? So moving the knowledge. And that could be done very easily there's so many things in this space that are free. I mean, that's one thing that I want to make sure that people realize, that I don't want people to walk away and go, oh yeah, well, those guys work for a big accounting firm, right? Like everybody listening to this, there's 220 offices of the Canadian Mental Health Association across Canada. You know, they've been around for over 100 years. Reach out to those organizations and ask them to come and do a seminar. Many of them will probably do it for free or for a nominal sum. Odds are you already have a local relationship with them, right? So to move the dial on knowledge, maybe you have somebody who's got a lived experience, who's brave enough to do, you know, a pizza lunch or something and share the story. So all kinds of events to promote awareness and start talking about it. Mental Health Week, benefit providers. Most of the contracts of all your benefit providers have a clause in there, and if it's not there, negotiate it on your next round to get 1 or 2 free seminars. But even at KPMG, we weren't using those seminars, right? Many of us don't know. So the awareness is learning, I would say. Training is more formalized. And the number one tool on the training front, you know, you probably have first aid training, maybe even CPR,
All these
right?
things.
I have both. We haven't given too many Band-Aids in our professional careers and even on the home front. But when it comes to mental health, you know, knowing what we know now, that's what we were facing. We just didn't know. Well, there's a mental health first aid training course that's been around 15 years. Professors who are vetted, right? I often say when people tell me, Denis, where would you start? I would at least take my executives, my people leaders, my senior people, and instead of giving them a bonus, I would pay for that course or fund a part of it. Imagine onboarding, Charles-Antoine, in the awareness and training. But imagine if you're onboarding, you were giving mental health first aid training on the first 2 days. I think you would be calling family and saying, God, I really picked the right organization, right? So the training is more formalized, working with your benefit providers to come in and do two-hour sessions on mental health, whatever. Jack.org does all kinds of seminar. It's having somebody who could find these things, right? The support side is more, I look at what universities have done, and I always warn people, these legs kind of got to go together, right? Because you could imagine we're raising the awareness where our team is comfortable asking for help, but there's no support, there's no benefit, there's nothing, right? And if we look sometimes in universities, we've done a great job at getting our kids to ask for help, but universities sometimes had not thought through that we're not in a counseling business. Kids can't get help, right? So I always say on the support side, you got to make sure that your benefits are there, or maybe you have enough mental health first aid people trained so that they can help with language, so that people can interact and drag them to right resources, right? So heavy duty focus on awareness.
And now we're going to go to maybe a different kind of line of questioning. Denise, say earlier on, we talked about the tsunami of mental health issues that is hitting us at the moment, and it's especially because of the COVID, the circumstances, which is quite unique. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about why we're saying it's a tsunami? It's not, and we should really pay attention to it at the moment. So maybe you can share some data points or some perspective on it, if you could.
You know, like oftentimes it says a tsunami is coming. I mean, the tsunami's here. I mean, if you look at recent papers, you know, addressing burnout at home and at work, entrepreneurs face mental health issues, working from home and the challenges with that, employers wrestling new epidemic with growing rates of mental health, right? So we're right there. Let's talk, but I'm not sure, you know, the walking the talk behind the scene is fully there. And in this virtual world now, I mean, I love this study that the Canadian Mental Health Association did, CMHO, where they surveyed 1,000 people, and the question, you know, when somebody checks in on you and says, how are you? 77% of those asked said, I'm fine, thanks. You know, and during Mental Health Week this year, it was really neat, the videos they did. It was like, I'm asking you the question, how are you? And you say, I'm fine, thanks. Then there was a delay, and then you could see the thoughts in your head going, well, I wish I could tell them the kids are driving me crazy, or I've got an aging parent that's in a nursing home that I can't go, right? So I really like the team and how it ties in with COVID and this challenge of get real about how you feel. And that was the theme for Mental Health Week, in the sense that when you are checking in with people, be it an aging parent or a colleague and so on, think through a little bit that if I'm asking you, how are you, Charles-Antoine, you say, I'm fine. My next wording should be, oh, really? Wow, like, help me out. Like, I've got this and that. And right away, just by sharing something personal or showing a little bit of vulnerability, it's kind of like, wow, this person really cares about me, right? Because one big worry in this virtual world is that you and I know we have some people who are great people, right? Let's face it, they're usually the ones who take care of our recruiting and so on. So during COVID, they're probably the ones doing an even better job checking in. But what about the person that, they're more like to do their own thing and, checking in on colleagues, it's not something they'd even normally do at the office. So there's a worry that some people in this virtual world, we hear a lot about social isolation. I was on a panel with all these human resource leaders, and they were talking about social isolation pre-COVID and the impact on mental health. And once again, like, my take on that is that it comes back to DNA, right? If you're working in an organization where it's not in the DNA and common language of opening up and asking for help and talking about mental health, I think we all know that working virtually is just going to make it worse, right? So making sure that's on the radar and becomes normalized, start meetings, how's our team doing, right? Oh, they're running a little too hot here, maybe we should do this, and so on, right? And as professionals, often, perhaps we haven't done enough of that, right?
And it's, remember, so when I came in CP, I think it's also quite a question of being generous. Especially in those times, to see where these trying times, the city, where we've got to maybe do the extra miles, so be generous, to say, with others. Be more. It's okay to be patient, be generous. I'm an optimist by nature, and we're going to get through it. I'm sure, say, we're going to get through it. The city. I won't tell you the date to say where I think to say we're going to be through it, but it's we're coming close to the half point. To say is all what I will say on that. To say, but for that period of time, to say, maybe if we can just show a bit more care, patience, generosity with each other. I think that's going to go a long way. That's going to help us. I also say, the objective is when we're going to be coming out of it, we're going to be healthy. So if we can all do that a bit, and we're going to come out of the other side, we're going to be able to resume, very often I call it the new better. It's going to be not the old normal, not the new normal, but the new better. But the city, so showing a bit of compassion, generosity, to say we'll go some way. One point the city that is very from the working habit to see perspective to see is something worthwhile to think about or talk about is at the moment to see we for the last 4 or 5 months now we all been zoomed in, zoomed out, teams in, teams out to see so we've been videos and people think to say it's working well. What is your perspective on this? Is it some will tell us to say that it's been working okay in the circumstances, but we've been drawing down the social cohesion capital that we had accumulated over the last 10, 20 years. So we've got to...
Inclusivity as well is a big one that we read a lot about, that, how we would always be focused as leaders and a chair to make sure that I've seen you do that in action at board meetings where, the person or maybe sometimes doesn't participate to give them a chance. And now I think in this virtual world,
it's difficult.
That we've gone back to some bad habits, right? So I think people being focused and cognizant that it's not just those two little cubby holes talking all the time virtually, just because of the challenge that it's awkward a little bit becomes even more challenging, right? So
I think there's maybe something to say we all have to pay attention to it, the city, and recognize that we're probably drawing down the capital. It's like goodwill. Goodwill, if you don't replenish it, it will come down to zero. So we're probably boring to see drawing down the asset that we had, and we've got to pay real attention and how to at least maintain it. Don't erode it too much. We'll be able to rebuild it afterwards, but let's not bring it down too low. That would be my perspective. That's the way I try to.
The tsunami side too, and COVID, and you know, when you said we've been at this now, what, 160 days? I lose track, but one of the common questions I get from teams and out in the community is that we're running out of resilience, right? And it's
very much so.
Resilience right now is kind of one of those buzzwords that maybe we haven't been focused on that much, right? That we're all born with a certain level of resilience through our national DNA. And I think studies and doctors say that as professionals, we have a pretty high threshold. You know, our coping capacity to stress, but let's face it, we've never been challenged this way, right? I mean, it's interesting where perhaps people who travel a lot and they're working on these exciting projects, now they're realizing how much they miss that, because that was their me time. You know, the flight time, the hotel room time was where they recharge, right? So I just, if I may, would like to mention an amazing study that CPA Canada is part of. It's called Healthy Professional Works. And this goes to show,
I couldn't
you know,
do that myself.
in this world, you know, of where this is moving so fast. Here's an example of change. I mean, this is 18 Canadian universities participating in this study, where they're basically studying the mental health impact of various professions, accounting, medicine, nursing. So we're contributing CPA Canada to the accounting. The project is called Healthy Professional Work. In October, the survey in both official languages will be released. So I encourage members to participate in it. If you want to see about the study now, it's HPW for Healthy Professional Work at uottawa.ca. And the study is led by many professors like Professor Meridi Bujuki. So hopefully we'll have numerous members that can contribute to this study so that we can continue to pay it forward to our members.
Thank you very much, Denis, for all this information, and all the work you're doing for a very, very important cause, for all of us. So as I said, looking forward to have those discussions again with you, and also to advance the needle on that health, not mental health, but that health question.
Thank you.
Thank you, mon ami.